So welcome back to another video. Today we're continuing the discussion about EV charging that I started in the last episode. Now if you guys want to see exactly how my experience went over a week with the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5, make sure to check that video out. I did solely 120 volt charging, which is the slowest method of charging that you can do with an EV, and found that it is possible to live with 120 volt charging depending on your overall commute. Now today I want to discuss the associated costs with charging an EV at home, comparing it to my personal gasoline-powered vehicle, and also compared to some hybrids that are currently on the market that get greater than 50 mpgs. So just as a reminder, in case you guys didn't see the last video, I drove a 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5 SEL all-wheel drive for about 156 miles, and I averaged about 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour. Now that is a key statistic I will be using later on in the calculations for the cost associated with charging the vehicle. Generally, this is a little bit on the lower side of things for the efficiency of newer EVs, including the Ioniq 5, which should get about 3 to the low 3 range depending on what type of driving you're doing, and again, how efficient you are with the accelerator pedal. But I will be using 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour, which is what the vehicle told me I averaged. Over a 5-day period with the vehicle, I used only 120 volt charging once again at 10 and 12 amps, but it also is the fastest method of charging with the OEM Hyundai charger, as it maxes out at just 12 amps. Now when it comes to electricity costs in this area where we live, it's typically about 14 cents per kilowatt hour, which is generally about average across the country. I think it ranges from about 12 to maybe 18 to 20 cents depending on your area. The peak surcharges they charge. Around here there are no peak surcharges or lower rates at night. It's pretty much a general consistent 14 cents per kilowatt hour for residential rates. So to do these calculations, I'm going to be dividing the miles driven by the average efficiency said by the vehicle, which once again is 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour, then multiplying that by the cost of the electricity, which is 14 cents per kilowatt hour. And given there's not a 100% energy transfer in terms of efficiency, I'm going to be accounting for a 20% loss in these calculations, breaking out by, in theory, 100% and a 20% loss, so you guys can kind of look at them and compare for yourselves which one you think is closer to what is being realistic. But I think a 20% loss is fairly realistic in terms of charging on 120 volt power especially. So to do this, I'm going to take the theoretical cost at 100% efficiency, multiply it by 1.2, and get the total cost assuming a 20% loss. So here are the theoretical costs that were associated with charging over the 5 days. Now, as you can see, I took the daily mileage, divided it by 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour, which is the efficiency the car told me I was averaging, and then multiplied that by 14 cents per kilowatt hour to give me the 100% energy efficiency transfer price. And then again, I multiplied it by 1.2 to kind of associate some loss at 20% of the energy transfer. But as you can see, each day was well under $3 for the most part. We had one day at $2.99. But overall, it was extremely cheap. But nonetheless, even including the 20% efficiency loss with the 120 volt charging I was doing, it still came in under $10 to drive over 155 miles. So I would say that is definitely a very reasonable price and a lot less than, again, my personal vehicle would have been. So comparing this to my personal vehicle, I currently drive a 2019 Hyundai Elantra GT N-Line with the 1.6 liter turbo from Hyundai. Now the EPA rates this vehicle at 25 mpg city and I believe right over 30 mpg on the highway. Now in rear wheel driving that I do with this vehicle, I would say it's a slight mix, but definitely leans more towards on the city side of things. And the car typically says I'm getting right around 24 mpg. For the sake of the calculations, I'm going to go with the 25 mpg from the EPA because it is relatively close to what I see real world with the vehicle. Doing the math, we can see at 155 miles divided by 25 miles per gallon, I would use roughly 6.2 gallons of gasoline to travel the same distance as I did with the Ioniq 5. Now multiplying 6.2 gallons by the average cost of fuel currently, it's actually gone up in the last week or two to above this number, but I'm going to use $3.29 a gallon, and that would come out to $20.40 to drive the same distance in my personal vehicle as I did with that Ioniq 5. So you can see this represents a 53% savings if I were to do it in the Ioniq 5 over my personal vehicle, which is a substantial amount given it's only 155 miles. So you might be thinking at this point, wow, that looks like a very good result, and it is, of course, compared to my personal vehicle. However, when I did the calculation with a brand new Hyundai Elantra Hybrid, for example, the results might surprise you. So using the same distance of 155 miles divided by the 50 mpg average of the new Elantra Hybrid, That uses 3.1 gallons, or is exactly half the amount of fuel as my personal vehicle, given the MPG is doubled. So if we take the 3.1 gallons, multiply by the same 3.29 per gallon, that gives us $10.20. So when you compare this to the Ioniq 5, this only represents a 5% savings in the energy usage versus electricity or gasoline, and really 5% is very negligible. So as you can see, it definitely depends on the vehicle and how fuel efficient that vehicle is as to just how much you would save using an electric vehicle and charging at home with your current electricity rates. Now, as I came to find out, the Elantra Hybrid is very close to the same cost to operate on a daily basis as that of the Ioniq 5. Now, obviously, as gas prices continue to increase, as they have in the last couple weeks, actually, it's pretty much closer to $3.49, $3.59 in this area. That gap would start to grow a little bit, and you'd definitely be saving a little bit more money using the electricity costs, currently at about 14 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, I will say, when it came to driving the Ioniq 5, I definitely enjoyed it versus my personal vehicle. It's definitely much quicker, it's quieter, and more comfortable to drive on a daily basis. But it all depends on what you kind of value in a vehicle and its driving dynamics, its characteristics, all that kind of stuff. And if you do factor in the kind of driving dynamics of any electric vehicle you might be considering and how it compares to the equivalent gasoline-powered vehicle, I would say this is somewhat relevant to kind of input into the calculations as to how much savings and enjoyment you're getting from that said vehicle. Yes, you might only be saving 5% of the typical gasoline-powered vehicle. However, if you plan to keep it for a long time and you are getting more enjoyment out of said EV, I would definitely say you might as well go the EV route, even if it is maybe a little bit more expensive, if you can kind of justify it by how it drives and how it makes you feel on a daily basis, because driving a vehicle you don't really like or don't care for is definitely a detriment to your overall, I guess, mental health per se. But overall, I really enjoyed the Ioniq 5 and the EV experience. And just to quickly compare the DC fast charge rate, generally Electrify America charges 31 cents a kilowatt hour for their member discounted rate, and I believe it's 43 cents a kilowatt hour for the public rate, which basically anybody can pay for. So when you compare 31 cents a kilowatt hour to what I pay at home of 14 cents, this is substantially more than double. So when you factor that into our calculations, basically me driving my 25 mpg vehicle would be equivalent to that of paying for DC fast charging, except there would be less losses, I guess, at fast charging, but nonetheless, it would be very close to the same as paying for fast charging as that of a 25 mpg vehicle. And of course, the hybrid getting 50 mpg would actually be saving you money versus just paying for DC fast charging. So definitely keep that in mind when looking at electric vehicles, as it definitely depends on not only how efficient the vehicle is, how much you drive, but also how much you're paying for that energy going into the battery. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found something helpful out of it, and helped you understand the associated costs with not only running an EV but also a gasoline powered vehicle, both in a relatively efficient fashion and ultimately a hybrid that is extremely fuel efficient for what it is. So once again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously this is going to vary depending on where you live, how much you're paying for the electricity costs in your area, and again how efficient the EV is that you're actually driving, and also the charge method, because 120 volt charging is going to be the least efficient, 240 volt is going to be overall very efficient, and DC fast charging is going to be the most efficient. However, that is substantially more in terms of cost if you're paying at the general public rate and not getting any free trial included with your EV purchase. So keep all this in mind while shopping for a vehicle. But I just kind of wanted to highlight the costs associated with the charging that I did over my week with the Ioniq 5 and compare it to not only my personal vehicle, but also a very fuel efficient hybrid. So once again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.